Well, hello and welcome to episode 4 of Windows into Women's Ministry. My name is Carrie Sandom. I'm the Director of Women's Ministry at the Proclamation Trust in London. Now, we know that the backbone of women's ministry in the local church is small group Bible studies. So in this episode, I want us to think about how to lead really effective women's Bible studies. In many ways, leading a women's Bible study is no different to leading any other kind of Bible study. Indeed, some people have asked me over the years, why do we need women's Bible studies at all? Surely women can learn just as easily in a mixed group. And the answer to that is both yes and no. There's nothing in the Bible to suggest that women, or men for that matter, can't study the Bible together in a mixed setting. Nevertheless, I think there are several reasons why gender-based groups are a really good idea. Because men and women often relate with each other very differently. I think you can often apply things at a deeper level in a gender-based group. I think there are also different ages and stages of life when gender-based groups are a particularly good idea. With new mums perhaps meeting during the day, or new dads meeting in the early mornings so that evenings at home are kept clear. I think new Christians who are married to a non-believing spouse often find it easier to belong to a single-sex group. And of course, women's Bible study groups provide women who are gifted at teaching the Bible with many opportunities to lead Bible studies, which not all of them would feel comfortable doing in a mixed setting. So how are we to lead really effective women's Bible studies? Here are some top tips that I have found useful. First of all, we should plan to study whole books of the Bible and not just cherry-pick the sections we like. You might think a selection of parables from Luke's Gospel would be a really good thing to study, but it would be much better to start at the beginning and study the whole of Luke's Gospel, perhaps over a year or so. That way you will get to study the parables in their right context, which is crucial to understanding what they mean and how they apply. Secondly, it's good to study different books, both Old and New Testament, and a mix of biblical genres. There are 6 in all: Old Testament narrative, Old Testament prophecy, Old Testament wisdom, including the Psalms, New Testament narrative, including the Gospels and Acts, the New Testament epistles, and apocalyptic literature, most obviously the book of Revelation. So you might start a series studying Matthew 1 to 7, then do some studies from the Old Testament, perhaps from Isaiah 1 to 11, then some Psalms, and then the following year go back to Matthew and study 8 to 12, then back to Isaiah, and so on. Over a 5-year cycle, I would hope to study one book from each of the 6 biblical genres, or at least start a series from each of them. Psalms can be a great thing to study, but instead of cherry-picking your favourites, why not just start at the beginning and make your way through them all? I know of a church that always studies the Psalms in the summer term, and started at the beginning about 10 years ago, and are planning to do the Psalms of Ascent in their groups this year. That's Psalms 120 through to 134. Thirdly, at some point, it would be good to give people an overview of the Bible, so they understand how it all fits together. There are various ways you could do this. Maybe the senior pastor at your church could do a Bible overview with all of the small groups, either as a one-off talk or a short series of talks. I know several churches that would aim to do a Bible overview in this way every 3 years or so. But there are lots of resources available for small groups to study an overview of the Bible themselves. For example, God's Big Picture by Vaughan, or Remaking a Broken World by Christopher Ash. I can still remember the very first Bible overview I studied over 30 years ago, and how it helped me to join the dots together and see that the Bible is telling one story from creation to new creation. When people begin to see how the Bible fits together, it builds their confidence and establishes good foundations for a lifetime of study. I want the women in our churches to be biblically literate and to understand why we have the book of Judges and Job and Jeremiah and Joel, and how each of them contribute to the unfolding plan of God's rescue. I want them to know about the covenant promises God made to Abraham and to Moses and to David, and to understand the significance of the Exodus and the exile, and the return from exile, and how they all point forward to the Lord Jesus. The fourth top tip is that people need to understand that the way we study Genesis is very different to the way we study Romans, and the way we study Old Testament prophecy is very different to the way we study the Gospels. This means that we need to give them good Bible handling tools that will help them to unlock different biblical genres, tools that will help people to see what the passage actually says before thinking about what it means and how it applies. Andrew Sach's Dig Deeper books do just that and are a brilliant resource for both one-to-one and small group Bible studies. The fifth top tip is that people need to be careful not to jump into the passage and make it all about us. The Bible is not about us in the first instance. It is all about Jesus and God's unfolding plan of salvation. This means that if we're in the Old Testament, we should be asking, how does this passage point forward to the Lord Jesus? If we're in the Gospels, we should be asking, what do we learn about Jesus and his work here? And if we're in the rest of the New Testament, we should be asking, how does this passage proclaim Jesus and his work? These are questions that we should ask before we think about applying the Bible to ourselves. This leads on to the sixth top tip, which is we need to be careful not to teach the Bible legalistically. If you ask people walking down your local street what the Bible is, they would probably say it's full of outdated rules telling Christians how to live. But the Bible is not a rule book telling us how to live. It's got lots of rules in it, but most of the time they're there to reveal God's standards and to show us that we can't keep them, which is why we need someone to rescue us. The trouble is, when people study the Bible, they often make very legalistic applications. We must be like this or not be like that. The studies amount to little more than a character study of different people in the Bible, with the application that we should be more like Abraham or Ruth or David, but not at all like Pharaoh or Ahab or Jezebel. But this is to misunderstand those passages completely. If we draw a straight line from them then to us now, we eliminate the need for Jesus and his rescue and miss out on the main message of the Bible. And then lastly, we need to remember that the Bible was not written to us, at least not in the first instance. This means that we need to think about what it meant for the original readers, for them then, before thinking about what it means for people in the 21st century, for us now. The books of the Bible were written by and for real people living in a particular period of history. To understand each passage fully, we need to consider what the authors were saying to them then and why they were saying it. Once we have done that, we can then consider how it points forward to the Lord Jesus before thinking about what it means for us today, who live the other side of the cross. So to summarize, here are 4 simple questions that we can ask of any passage in the Bible. Firstly, what does the passage say? Then secondly, what did it mean for the original hearers? Thirdly, how does it point forward to or proclaim Jesus and his work? And lastly, what does this mean for us today, both to believers and unbelievers? Answer these 4 questions and you will be well on your way to leading really effective Bible studies, whether it's for men or for women or both at the same time. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.